This is David Solomon's The Storyteller. This is called The Last Chance. For those of you who are too young to know, and I can't believe I need to explain this, but I will, the Beatles weren't just a band, they were the band, the biggest pop group of all time. Think Taylor Swift, multiply it by Ed Sheeran, and every boy band and girl band that you ever knew, and you're getting close. Actually, no, you're not really. They changed music forever. And this is the story of how I ended up taking them on in court with nothing but a photograph, blind optimism, oh yes, and my client. I've changed my client's name to Frank Smith to protect his privacy. Although, somewhere in London, there's probably still a Beatles lawyer twitching every time someone mentions missing photographs. What would you do if a young man walked into your law office and he told you that he was being sued by the Beatles? Oh yes, and 7 other law firms had already shown him the door and told him they weren't interested. Actually, I want to rephrase that. What would you do if you were the newest trainee lawyer? So fresh, they haven't even found you a proper desk yet. You were effectively sitting on the floor. No money, no appointment. He's been turned down by 7 firms. The receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. It was rather robotic. Where shall I send him? Oh, to the person lowest on the food chain, of course. That would be, me. You got it. Frank Smith, a young man about my age, walked into my office looking like he was carrying the weight of the entire British music industry on his narrow shoulders. He was hunched over. He told me his father, Michael, had been the court photographer for the Beatles and the Rolling Stones before dying tragically of a heroin overdose. Now, Frank wanted to publish a book of his father's photographs, which the Beatles or their company Apple said they owned. And they included shots from what Rolling Stone magazine had named the greatest album cover ever. Yes, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Youngsters Zoom it or ChatGPT it. The Beatles say they own everything, he said, all of the photos. His voice was tight. They'll fight me all the way. And the other firms, I asked? Said I couldn't win. Said I was mad to try. He paused. Maybe they're right. I was, skeptical. Who wouldn't be? But this was before Google, before mobile phones, before you could fact check someone's story with a few clicks in a couple of seconds. And then Frank started pulling out document after document, proof after proof of what he had said. I looked at this young man who was determined to honour his father's memory despite everything. And I did something. It's either very brave or very stupid. I told 2 lies that day, 2 big lies. One to Frank, who would become at that point my only client. Oh, this is right up our street. We handle these cases all the time. To my boss, this new client has money. It's going to be a big case for us. Not so much really to either. What followed was years and years of David versus Goliath. The Beatles lawyers, they threw everything at us. Delay after delay. Hearing after hearing. On and on. Frank would run out of money, disappear, I didn't know where, and then somehow scrape together just enough money for us to keep going. I can't give up, he'd tell me, pulling out another bunch of photos. This isn't just about me anymore. It's really about Dad. By the time we reached trial, I had my own very small firm. There was that. Frank, me, and our barrister, facing 7 solicitors and 2 barristers from one of London's largest law firms acting for the Beatles. Phew, the Beatles themselves, they didn't show in court. Part of me was disappointed, part relieved. I mean, how do you cross-examine Paul McCartney? He's a legend. Our key witness was Terry O'Neill, a very famous rock photographer who was around in the 1960s and was able to cast light on how photographs were commissioned back in those heady days. Truth be told, I spent quite a lot of time with him in London pubs before the hearing, while he regaled me over pints with naughty stories of the 1960s. He was magnificent in court, really. You could see the judge hanging on his every word. And then something extraordinary happened. The judge ruled entirely in our favour. But as I watched the opposing lawyers' faces break into subtle smiles, I knew something was wrong. Our barrister confirmed my fears. The judge, he's gone too far in his judgment. I know it looks great, but it's such a case, it's so easy to appeal. They will win on the appeal in the Court of Appeal. Frank was out of money to pay for the appeal. We were staring into the abyss. And then Frank called me, his voice flat with despair. David, the BBC is running a massive series on Sergeant Pepper next month. They're using all of the photographs. Suddenly, a light went on. Something meant something there. I picked up the phone and I dialed the Beatles solicitor's senior partner. We'll call him Mr. Graham, shall we, to protect the innocent. Although I don't think he was that innocent. Hello, Mr. Graham, I said, keeping my voice casual. Looking forward to seeing you at the appeal. Yes, Mr. Solomons, he replied, confidence oozing through the line. Won't be long now, won't be long, see you there. You know, Mr. Graham, I noticed there's a BBC series on Sergeant Pepper coming out soon. Major production, I hear. Yes, should be excellent, Mr. Solomons, looking forward to it. Mr. Graham, I said slowly, deliberately, what happens if you don't win the appeal? We will, Mr. Solomons. But just imagine for a moment you don't, and there's always a chance. Have you considered the costs if the BBC have to cancel that series? The damages would be enormous, and they would sue your clients for everything because they promised the photographs. The silence that followed was the longest of my pretty short career. Finally, I'll get back to you, Mr. Solomons. Bang. For 2 weeks, I waited by the phone, and Frank paced up and down my office incessantly. You got it. It was a bluff. We didn't have the money for the trial. But my hope is that it was a good bluff. 2 weeks later, my client sold the photographs to the Beatles for a large sum I still can't disclose. It was a victory. Frank went on to publish his book with huge success, with no objection from the Beatles. Yes, it was a great success even without the Sgt. Pepper photos. On settlement day, I turned up at their solicitors' offices with all the photos Frank had given me, meticulously scheduled. He was good like that, Frank. 7 solicitors sat opposite little me as we went through everything. At the end, there was one photograph missing. I didn't know where it was, and the Beatles lawyers were not happy. Mr. Solomons, we had a deal. You sent every photograph. It's all I've got, I said a little defiantly, having checked with my client who also didn't know where it was. Well, the deal went through. Oh yes, with a single condition. If the missing photo ever surfaced, it must be returned. And that was that, I thought. And then, on my birthday, February the 18th, for those of you who are taking notes, an envelope arrived. Inside was the missing print with a note to David. In memory of the day the Beatles took on the power and the might of Solomon's. Happy birthday, Frank. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the cases, well, I guess nobody else would take. And sometimes, just sometimes, the missing piece of the puzzle makes the perfect birthday present. I do hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for joining me for another story that just needed telling. If you enjoy this tale, well, there are plenty more where that came from. From courtroom battles with music legends to life lessons learned at 35,000 feet. Each story here will change how you see the world, just a little bit maybe. Hit subscribe to catch the next story, because sometimes the best tales find you when you least expect them.